Excuse me. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Hope TV. My name is Kelly Burns. I am the program manager and art therapist for Stars of Hope. Very excited. Hi, everybody. To launch Hope TV and have our very first interview with Suzzane Bernier, crisis management consultant and founder and author of Disaster Heroes. Welcome, Suzzane.
It's great to be here.
Thanks. Thank you for being here. So our goal with Hope TV is to continue the mission of Stars of Hope, of spreading our messages of hope and healing. Despite we can't do it in person right now, but we can do it through lots of different ways. And so we're going to do it this way. So before I start asking you to start sharing stories that you have noticing or gathering, I'm just curious, like what are your thoughts, impressions right now, either from professionally or personally, what's going on regarding, the epidemic for COVID-19?
Yeah, well, I have, I guess, a vested interest in what we're going through right now, because I've spent the last 18 years myself professionally in my career researching and developing plans for our Canadian government and other entities on how to be prepared for this exact type of scenario that we're going through now. But my responsibility back then as a planner has been to look at what kinds of things might happen, and then how we would be able to put things in place to try to mitigate or prevent increased spread, sort of exactly what we're seeing being done now. But the one thing that I wasn't involved in so much back then, I hadn't written Disaster Heroes yet. I hadn't started focusing more on the positive side and thinking about the human element, the personal element of disaster management so much, and the healing side of things so much. So I realize, as we're going through this pandemic, all of the other side of the goodness that's coming out, all of the heroic actions that people are taking, the people that are making masks themselves and protective equipment, and the companies who are stepping up and they're changing their manufacturing process. Instead of manufacturing, fashion gowns, instead they're creating hospital gowns, and all of these things that we didn't actually plan for in the plans. The plans were about, okay, what government is going to do and what different levels of the states of government and municipalities and what they're going to do, and the volunteer groups and all of the people that we would normally rely on for any kind of disaster. That's who we based our assumptions on with those plans. The encouraging thing to see is what those plans weren't based on were the assumptions of people stepping up and providing assistance where they can. So it's horrible what we're seeing, especially in some of the worst hit areas around the world, especially in North America. But it's really, really great to see what we've always known, which is that if and when people can, they really want to step up and be able to help in whatever way they can. And even though, a lot of us wish that we were healthcare practitioners right now, or wish that we had training to be doctors and nurses, to be able to provide that life-saving, heroic, work that is really needed right now. But even though we're not, there's still so many other skills that we have and things that we can do to be able to support those who are critical. And so well about what's going on out there to support our communities through even Stars of Hope.
Mm-hmm. You bring up a good point. Like it's been interesting to watch this kind of natural, organic, behind the scenes, all of us stuck at home in a way. We can't be out there, but we feel this need to be helped, that organic, we want to be helping still. So we are at our sewing machines making masks. We are, cutting out our paper stars and showing them online. We're out our window singing to the ambulances down the street. We're still doing something. There's that kinetic energy still going on. It's like we're still trying to focus on some sort of positive, I think.
Yeah.
Which I like you, and you highlight that a lot in your work, like focusing on the positive no matter what, trying to when during a disaster.
Yeah, and with this disaster, I'm trying to now kind of repurpose the message of, because I've also recently started a Disaster Heroes podcast, which is sort of highlighting some of the people that are in the book, but just other people that I've met along the way or been referred to along the way. There's so many heroes out there. Unfortunately, there's a lot of disasters in the world, but fortunately, for each one of those disasters, there are hundreds of thousands of heroes to be able to talk about. So I had been starting a podcast just a few episodes in before the coronavirus hit and literally, exploded very quickly across North America. So then I kind of shut it down, not shut it down, but just kind of put it aside, thinking, how am I going to repurpose this? And now I've realized a way that it's going to be repurposed. So maybe this will be the perfect avenue to announce to people how that's going to be done. And then I can let you know and keep you posted on how it's all going to roll out. But so Disaster Heroes, the podcast, has its own call-in line where people can call in and leave a voicemail message up to 2 minutes and record whatever they want. They can either leave an anonymous message or they can leave their name and who they're with or whatever. And so what I wanted to use and what I think might be really effective is to be able to use the Disaster Heroes podcast, that line, as a voice for the heroes. And so whoever wants to just say, hey, this is Jackie. I'm a nurse in the whatever ward in whatever hospital. And thank you to so-and-so for bringing in those donuts the other day, or whatever message they want to get out to the general public. Yeah. And then also on the other side, I think there's a lot of the members of the general public or people maybe who've been helped by those heroes as well, who would love to be able to communicate messages back. So I think that's how I'm going to repurpose the Disaster Heroes podcast for now, to be able to just, instead of it being, a typical podcast where I'll be interviewing someone every 2 weeks, it might be every couple of days. It'll just be some snippets of recordings of people, the heroes themselves on the front lines, that wanted to leave a certain message for people. And I think that's going to really reach out to people, and it'll help create that bond between our heroes and the people who want to thank them.
It makes them really like a person, tangible, because you hear the voice. You actually hear the voice, like they are a human. It almost like adds another layer of healing to it. You hear who they are, you hear the cadence, and it adds that extra layer to it, which I think would be so special. I think that's just something very extra. So I know we would look really forward to hearing it. It's very cool. Is there anything else maybe from other disasters you'd worked through that we can pull from that will just keep the hope going?
Yeah.
Because sorry, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. I think that the biggest thing is for me as a practitioner, because I've had to go into actual disasters and help respond or help recover. And I know you have been on the recovery side as well, and I'm not sure how much response side, but I know the general public don't really get to see. Fortunately, most of the general public won't ever have to go through a disaster where they'll have to see what goes on behind the scenes. But fortunately, there's a lot of amazing things that do go on behind the scenes. So that's kind of what I want to keep focusing on, and what I just kept noticing every time that I would be sent to help respond and coordinate response and recovery after a disaster was that there was always these so many positive things happening behind the scenes that the general public didn't know about, because all they heard about was the 3-minute clip that you hear on the news. And you don't really get to hear or see all of the goodness and everybody coming together, all the agencies, all the volunteers, everybody coming together every time there's a disaster. And I think that's just so important to get that message out to people. And also that sometimes these people who are coming together are not the typical heroes that you would normally think of. And so it also gets people to think, oh, wait a minute, I have a certain skill. I might not have a badge, but I have a certain skill or talent or an idea that I think might help this community after a disaster. And that happens every time there's a disaster. And that's kind of just what I feel that we need to focus more on, that to encourage people and let everybody know that, yes, especially now we're going through what seems to be, and it's going to be a very long process of recovery and healing. But we will all get through it, and people need to remember that and be reminded that not only do we always get through things, but that we get through them together, and that behind the scenes, there are so many people that end up coming together. And it's unfortunate that sometimes we only see that when something bad happens and it brings us all together. Yeah. But that's a good thing, I think, that we're seeing out of this. And we'll continue seeing that as well as we get through this. And until a vaccine comes out, I think we're going to continue seeing a lot of heroic people. And we're already seeing them, from famous people who are launching campaigns to be able to raise funds and awareness, to 100-year-old military veterans who are walking around their block 100 times to raise money, to people who are, like I said, who were, making homemade masks, to just so many different heroic ideas of what people are doing out there to try to help. Meanwhile, while we're also in a very stressful time, because all of us are facing the same thing. So it's different than any other emergency that we've ever had before too, where at least we've had other areas that were not affected by something and could help us. But now we're kind of we all need help all together. So it's even more important to rely on our neighbors and figure out creative ways to get us through this.
Right. Yeah. Any specific examples you can think of you'd like to share with all of us?
Of kind of groups that are getting together to volunteer things? Yeah, there's a couple that I've noticed. A lot of things are happening through Facebook, and oh my goodness, thank goodness for Zoom too these days. But there's a few different Facebook groups that I've seen come together. One group that's been very hurt by, but there have been a lot of groups, of course, that have been very hurt by what's been happening if they're deemed non-essential, right? But one of them is the acting community.
Yeah.
And you don't think about it so much, but they've been really hit. I mean, they can't really do anything at all, right? So those, from whether you're on Broadway or to a smaller theater group or anything in between, really, that's all been halted now for however long. But they've gone ahead and created their own little Facebook group to help them, everything from answering questions on how they can get financial assistance depending on, their circumstance, to ways to, well, we heard about this one little job that's, doing a commercial for, this for COVID-19 and the link, or just a lot of it, just a really great support network for that group to help them. Also, there's somebody, who's the administrator, who makes sure that he posts and guides people to the correct information, so that he tries to make sure that it also acts as like a rumor control page for the members, which is really, really an important piece too, right? That whole communications piece, and making sure that people are guided to the right resources. So that group has been doing, and then they've been coming up with their own creative ways because they're all kind of out of work right now. So while they are, okay, well, what things can they do based on the skills that they have to be able to give back right now? So they're coming up with different creative ideas. So that's been very cool.
Yeah.
And then I've even seen in the background, and because of the background that I'm in, which is in emergency management, another very cool thing that I've seen is behind the scenes with Slack. And some of us might be familiar with Slack now too, another tool that a lot of businesses and groups use to be able to communicate behind the scenes. So one Slack group that I've noticed that I'm a part of now is all emergency managers from all across North America, who behind the scenes are kind of, helping each other out, not officially in their roles, but just in different ways, like whether it's like light humor and the joke of the day is one of the forums. And then another forum is just sharing information on, hey, did you guys have any good ideas on what you implemented today for a new creative word for social distancing, or just so many different things, right?
Yeah.
But it's really cool to see all of these different groups step up and do that. And that's something that is different than I would have seen in the last major emergency at all, because of how much social media has grown.
Yeah.
And now we have access to all of these platforms to be able to create all of these groups that can then communicate together. So I think that's something that I've observed that's changed a lot, that's helped a lot.
It's interesting. It sounds like people's walls are coming down a little bit and willing to like put out there something that they're willing to share, that they need a little bit that support, that make sure that you're going to this place, or I'm not sure where I need to go. Walls are a little more vulnerability, and people are stepping up to carry that weight a little bit more. Even though we're not physically together, it's wonderful to see. And we'll need to continue to do that for a while, as like you said. So it is very interesting to see that grow and how organic it came. Yeah.
Now, another thing that I found very interesting to see was how people really did shift very easily from the concept of the Stars of Hope, the wooden, tangible Stars of Hope, versus the change to the paper Stars of Hope, because of the need of that right now, as not being able to ship, Stars of Hope around physically to potentially infect others, right? But in the meantime, I wanted to share another example recently that happened. Was a group. It was emergency manager in Burlington, Ontario, so a city just outside of Toronto, Canada, and who'd contacted me and said, hey, I have this idea about maybe incorporating Stars of Hope with our city and to be able to thank our first responders. And so I said, sure. And she said, do you think that we could do a Stars of Hope thing? And I said, yeah, this is exactly what we're starting now, is kind of a paper version, electronic Stars of Hope. And so I sent her everything, and they officially declared, Stars of Hope Day in the city of Burlington. And the mayor sent out a press release, and they had the community print out at home the digital Stars of Hope, and then they had them all color them, and they started posting them on their windows in recognition of the first responders and stuff. So that was the first official community in Canada to do that, to adopt the Stars of Hope program as a recovery tool to help not only those who were stuck inside, to give them something to do, but then by posting it externally, being able to show the first responders messages of hope. So that was very cool. And then since then, I've had a couple of other groups that originally we were going to do the painting together. And then now, of course, because everything's changed with the not being able to group together, they've also decided. So now we're doing another virtual all together kind of Zoom paint, but all with our paper stars instead. And then we're all going to share them virtually. So it's great to see that people still are seeing and recognizing the value, and it's even more immediate in a way because people want to get them online right away and show them to people. And so it's been really, really great to see how Stars of Hope has been continuing on in that way.
Yeah. It looks like we have a question from Facebook. Susan.
Okay.
Yeah. What is the best thing we can do to help frontline workers emotionally to prevent more trauma?
Yeah. I think the best thing we can do is encourage them and accept them to realize that they need to be aware, that they need to be aware of the possibility of PTSD in their roles, and being able to steer them to the right resources to be able to let them know what types of signs to be aware of and where to go to get the right resources. And it's specifically, I think, even more important in the first responder arena because it's still stigmatized, I think, in certain areas. So if it comes from the top, from the leadership, it's much more accepted, I think, for people then to be able to recognize and say that, okay, yeah, I need to be aware that I might be affected by something, and maybe I should be recognizing this. But I think it needs to be something that needs to be promoted from the top so that everybody's aware of it, and that everybody gets the same message, and hopefully everybody is given the same resources or access to or links to resources of where to go to be able to get information. Kelly, what do you think?
I agree. It needs to be, information needs to be out there, that it's available, and that it's okay. It is true that I think there's still stigma that first responders are hesitant to reach out for psychotherapy for PTSD or just crisis management especially something after like this. But to let them know that it's okay. So just to keep that information available, to let them know that it's there. And hopefully that they're, wherever they're working is supporting that and encouraging it and making time available for it.
Right.
I think would be incredibly helpful.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a mistake that we used to do as emergency managers. Mm-hmm. Is we would go out and promote and make sure that communities recognize that, okay, make sure that everybody needs to go through trauma therapy or have the support they need. But then we wouldn't realize, oh, wait a minute, the officers themselves need to have that support as well. So, yeah, definitely important.
The helpers need help as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Suzzane, I thank you so much for sharing with us everything. This was really valuable, I feel like. A great first kickoff to Hope TV. Anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think that just want to let everybody know that this is probably going to be the longest disaster that we've had to go through for a while, the longest running one, where it's going to, it's going to be months of recovery. But that from what I see, and that from what we keep seeing after every disaster, that we'll have so many people stepping up. And because we're all in it together, like we keep hearing people say it, but it's true. I think that is going to help us because we are all in this together. What I'm seeing is more people collaborating instead of competing. For the next several months, it's not going to be about competition for anybody. It's going to be about collaborating together so that we can all get through this to the better world, whatever that's going to be at the end of it. But no, I just think that we still just need to keep looking for those helpers. And I used to always start my presentations off, and now maybe there'll be virtual seminars for a while instead of face-to-face presentations. But I used to like showing an image of Mr. Rogers on my presentation. And maybe I'll end it off with this message for people. And I would show a message of him, and I would let people and remind people that when he was a little boy, he shared a story that when he'd see something scary in the news, he would run to his mother. And his mother would say to him, look for the helpers. You'll always find people who are helping. And he said that's what made him feel more comforted when he'd see bad things in the news. So that's what I want to remind everybody. The next time you see something bad in the news, or your children see something bad in the news, or on the internet, or on television, may have a game of it and get them to point out all of the helpers and the heroes that are behind the scenes or in the periphery, because they're always there. It's just sometimes we're always so focused on looking at the bad image that's in the middle of the screen or the picture that we miss all of the heroes and the helpers that are around there. So that's what I would leave it at, is I'm still always encouraged, and I think we all should be, to know that, yeah, we see those bad things happening, but know that there's so many of those helpers and heroes that are all around, and they always will be. And so I think that's what can keep us going and keep us encouraged throughout this disaster and anything else we face in the future. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Suzzane. All right, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining us for our Hope TV, and we'll be announcing our next interview very soon. So we'll see you then.